Hi, I'm Tommy Knepper, CEO and co-founder of Infield Strategies, a nationwide grassroots outreach firm. I'm here to talk to you today about setting up a sound strategy for your campaign. So you've decided to jump in. Maybe you've watched one of my earlier modules. Maybe you figured out how to do it on your own, and you set up your initial campaign, meaning you found that seed money, you got those fundraising dollars in the door, and you know that you can launch a campaign in a successful way, meaning you can run an aggressive campaign and you can attempt to win. How do you go about setting up a strategy, a path to victory, which you will need, obviously, in order to win? It doesn't help to just go and throw everything against the fridge and see what sticks. You really do need to have a plan on how you're going to use those dollars that you've raised, that seed money that you've invested, in order to get to victory. And so make sure you map that out ahead of time or very early on, and then stick to it as much as you can. Obviously, you will adjust it based on dollars raised and expenditures made as you go, but you do need to have a initial strategy, a path to victory, and mostly stick to that. What will that consist of? Initially, you need to make sure that you have a data-driven campaign and a solid internal staff. What do I mean by that? You need to have a campaign manager or a deputy campaign manager, a day-to-day person who is going to help you keep the trains running on time, is going to help chase down checks from donors, is going to help deal with volunteers and pass out swag. You need to have that in place, and you need to budget appropriately for that internal staffer in order to run a successful campaign, because one of the pitfalls as you get out there and start campaigning is when volunteers call your office, or local establishment members call your office, or big donors call your office and they don't get a response, that will hurt your campaign. And so you need to have a plan and a person or people in place to handle that day-to-day those day-to-day issues. You need to have a data-driven campaign. And what do I mean by that? You need to have a clear path to victory. So if your seat is, 20 points against you, 10 points against you, how are you going to flip those 10% of voters, or those 15% of voters, or 20% of voters in order to get to victory? Sometimes it will involve an aggressive GOTV effort. Sometimes it will involve signing more voters up for absentee ballot. Sometimes it will involve persuading voters, but you need to know what that path is, and you need to have a data-driven campaign, whether that's hiring a pollster or a data modeler at a higher level, or even just hiring an internal staff who understands how to crunch past models and look at past voter history and give you some sort of data. But you don't just want to go out and talk to every voter and spend dollars going after every voter, because that's a waste of time. So make sure you understand who you need to talk to win and how you're going to go after them and talk to them. You need to have a clear plan for your grassroots outreach. So whether you're staffing it internally or you're hiring a company like mine, one of the requirements for your campaign undoubtedly will be knocking on doors, sending text messages, making phone calls. A lot of times at down ballot races, that will involve you knocking on doors yourself, you making some phone calls to voters as well, and talking to voters at events. Although your time as a candidate is always best spent fundraising. So you will want to have a grassroots outreach operation in place, or at least a plan for it to go into place, when it's going to start, how many people is that going to comprise, who you're going to talk to, and how many times you're going to talk to those voters in order for you to get success. You're going to need to have air cover. So you need to plan for digital and direct mail. It does help the most to have somebody going door to door, knocking on doors and talking to voters, especially if you have the spare time to do it. Your conversations will persuade the most voters of anything. And a door to door, face to face conversation persuades the most voters to move much more than any other medium. That being said, a door conversation in a vacuum is not usually the most effective. You need to have some air cover via digital outreach, via mail, even via text message. You need to have something else softening the ground so that when that voter is at the door talking to our canvasser, your canvasser, they have already heard about you or your issue, your cause. They have heard about your campaign, and they are much more receptive to that conversation. So make sure you have a plan for digital, for mail. Make sure you have a plan for a good website, something that can actually receive inbound requests from donors and from volunteers. And again, going back to that, having a staffer fielding those and returning those answers in a timely manner, or returning those questions with an answer in a timely manner, is extremely important. So make sure you have that set up as well. And then obviously, if you have a larger campaign, or a campaign in a certain DMA, you might be looking at TV or even radio. And if that's the case, hopefully you either know that yourself or have hired a good general consultant or campaign manager in the area that understands how to get on cable or on radio or potentially even broadcast if it's a cheaper DMA or you're running a larger race. But that would also be part of your plan. So you need to have a clear path to victory on who you're going to talk to, how you're going to win. You need to have that internal staff mapped out on who's going to handle the day-to-day, who's going to help you with the day-to-day fundraising, the day-to-day volunteer efforts, all of that. You need to have your grassroots outreach plan in place. When is it going to start? How many people are you going to employ? Or what company are you going to employ? What's your budget for that? How many iterations are you going to go through talking to voters? You need to have your air cover plan in place at a minimum, your digital plan, your mail plan, including your website, robust digital outreach, some text messages linking to your website or YouTube channel, what have you. And you need to have direct mail reaching that swath of voters that still receives their information via the mailbox. And then again, if you have the budget for it and the space for it, you will have a TV and radio budget. If you have that plan in place and you have mapped that out from your starting day to all the way through election day, backwards planning from election day and budgeted appropriately, you are in a very good spot to win your election.